a pro meetings being recorded.
I
apologize. So one of my current projects, which I'm, subsumed by, is the Detroit Water Stories project. It's an open access oral history project. You can actually just go to it directly. It's called DetroitWaterStories.com. It's online. And what we've been doing is we've been gathering oral histories from residents, activists, engineers, healthcare workers, and even nonprofit workers and government workers. Some of them are anonymous. Some of them are very much up clear, loud and proud about the issues that we're facing and how we need to face them. And the idea is to try to shift the needle of the public debate as far as public engagement around sustainability and environmental issues are concerned. With the Water Stories project, what we're trying to really emphasize is that the environment is not an issue out there that doesn't affect us here. It affects us in our everyday worlds. And often, unfortunately, the folks who are the most disproportionately impacted are poor people, people on low incomes or fixed incomes, people of color, people where you don't really necessarily have those infrastructural resources. So that's kind of what the Detroit Water Stories project tries to get at. And later on, if we have time, I'm sure I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the other service learning projects that I've been trying to work with in my classes. With both my undergraduate and graduate students, we do memes, we do infographics, we do videos, we do all sorts of stuff to work with our community partners to get the ball rolling. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you so much. We appreciate you helping us out. We will now move on to our next speaker, Madison Holloman. She's going to be introduced by Grace Maves.
Hi, everyone. This is Grace, intern with the Office of Campus Sustainability, and it is an honor to be able to invite Maddie Holloman, who is a student representing the Fashion Design and Merchandise program here at Wayne State. She has been an intern with the Wayne State's Office of Campus Sustainability for almost 2 years, and has been on the dean's list while pursuing her degree in fashion design and minoring in urban sustainability. And I just wanted to mention, when I asked Maddie to send me a bio, she was just kind of like, oh yeah, I've been on the dean's list and everything. And I think this really goes to show just Maddie's personality, because we see her as, or I see her as a silent leader. She is constantly a source of information for me to help me kind of accelerate in the work that I'm doing with the office. And I just think that speaks a lot to just her leadership and what she's been doing with the office here. So with no further ado, here's Maddie.
Thank you so much, Grace, for all the kind words. I'm so excited to be presenting today. I'll be talking about fast fashion and sustainability within the space of fashion overall. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. One second. So like Grace said, I am a fashion design and urban sustainability student. With that, I am extremely passionate about using the space of fashion as a dialogue for change. And knowing the role that fashion plays within our culture, it's important to me that we use fashion in a way that is sustainable and conscious. So what is fast fashion? Jumping right in. The topic is very broad, so I'm just going to give a quick little overview about the impacts and how we as individuals can make a positive impact within this space. So fast fashion can be described as a model of fashion production and consumption that relies on a fast turnaround of styles with overall low production prices, in turn making fashion more accessible to the masses. Fast fashion takes direct influence from the styles developed by high fashion brands that are seen on the runway and worn by celebrities. So in order for fast fashion companies like H&M, Zara, Old Navy, among many others to stay on trend, they're producing around 52 collections a year, which means that they're releasing multiple styles a week. Let me see, sorry, my screen isn't sharing. Can you guys see my screen? I just want to make sure. Okay, cool. And this model of production has led to an overall societal behavior in which we consume fashion in a way that is quick and disposable. Because of this, the fashion industry is one of the largest contributors to the climate change crisis, with an expectation of the fashion industry only to become larger. In 2018, the global fashion industry contributed around 2.1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is around 4% of total global emissions. With this, it is becoming very apparent that the fashion industry needs to make major steps in committing to reducing its overall environmental and human impact. So as I was talking about, the fashion industry has a huge environmental footprint, which is causing immense damage. The fashion industry uses tons of raw materials in its productions, mostly water, petroleum, land, among many others. One of the largest polluters that the fashion industry causes is the pollution of water. In its process, the fashion industry uses tons of toxic chemicals and synthetic dyes that are being released into the waterways of local communities. We also use lots of fertilizers when growing natural fibers. And our clothes are also made of synthetic fibers, which are plastic-based and are shedding microfibers into our waterways when we wash them. We continue to consume fashion in a way that is disposable, with large amounts of our clothes entering the landfill. The average American throws away around 81 pounds of clothing a year, with only 15% of those garments actually being recycled or donated. This is a huge problem because being that our clothes are made from these plastic-based fibers, they're going to be sitting in the landfill for hundreds of thousands of years and not breaking down very quickly. We also use tons and tons of fossil fuels to make our clothes, which is extremely energy intensive and leading to the mass amounts of greenhouse gases that are being released into the atmosphere. We clear cut forests and use tons of trees to produce sustainable plant-based fibers, which is extremely false because, like I said, we're clear cutting forests. And these are damaging ecosystems and indigenous peoples' communities. Okay, let's see. So looking at the social and human impact of the fashion industry, throughout the whole entire fashion structure, we use tons and tons of forced and child labor. Workers are employed for extremely long hours and earning very low wages. The average worker works around 14 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, earning around 33 cents to 85 cents an hour. So even though workers are working these extremely long hours, they're not earning a living wage. They face situations of harassment and discrimination. They're working in unsafe and unhealthy working conditions. The materials that they're using to create our products are extremely hazardous and detrimental to these individuals' health. They're often working in buildings that are structurally unsafe to be in. And workers are unable to defend their rights or advocate for new ones because they're unable to form unions. The pandemic has shed a lot of light on the situation that garment workers face. We know that they've been forced to work through the pandemic with little access to healthcare, PPE, and actual like regular pay. Large corporations have actually pulled out of a lot of their orders and failed to pay billions of dollars to garment workers throughout the pandemic.
Maddie,
yeah.
Are you working through your slides?
Yeah, are you guys not seeing them?
No, we're on the, I think we might be stuck on the first slide.
I wonder what, let me stop sharing and then reshare. I don't know what, my computer tends to do this sometimes. Let me see. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
Let's see. Can you see this? If I move through it like this, let's see. Can you see them now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll leave it like this. Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about diversity in the space of fashion, specifically in the sustainable fashion space. This is what I'm really passionate about working in and hoping to advocate for when I eventually go work in the fashion industry. So over the past few months, the sustainable fashion space has proved itself to fall short of creating an inclusive and ethical community that it often depicts itself as. From sustainable fashion brands like Reformation being called out for racism to large corporations failing to pay billions to garment workers, numerous issues have arisen. Many sustainable fashion brands only consider the environmental impact that their clothes take, but failing to consider what type of toll it takes on human lives and the experiences of the people who are making our clothes. The group of people that are most affected by the adverse effects of the fashion industry tend to be low income women of color. This is the majority of people who are making our clothes. And these groups are almost always left out of the conversation for sustainable solutions, yet are facing the consequences of unsustainability. It has been shown that when we create and advocate for inclusive and diverse teams, we tend to be more tentative towards environmental and social issues, and in the end, creating solutions and products that are more impactful. It is crucial within the space of fashion to critically work in centering and amplifying the most underrepresented and impacted voices. Another thing that I'm really passionate about within the space of sustainable fashion is, as a designer and a fashion creative, considering how we as a society tend to come to consume fashion. So we need to be thinking critically about how we consume fashion, because our overconsumption is directly impacting the future of sustainability. In turn, as designers and creatives within the industry, we need to work in creating products and environments that changes the overall attitudes towards consumption. Thinking about new ways for the consumer and our society to engage with fashion, creating garments that are versatile and of quality, so that we don't need to be buying 5 to 10 garments of the same product and then just wearing them a few times and throwing them out because they're not wearable anymore. Rather, investing in a garment that is of quality and having it for a few years. We need to be moving away from the traditional production model where we're producing 52 collections a year. That's not viable anymore. And we need to be holding brands accountable who are pushing for this fast consumption, pushing for this unsustainable consumption. So moving into how we as consumers and advocates for sustainable fashion can work in navigating this space. So the most sustainable items that you already have are the ones that you already own. You're not going out and purchasing and adding to the environmental impact or human impact when you already have things you already own. So reuse these until they aren't wearable anymore and repair them when needed. So in order to make up for the environmental costs that a single garment that you own has created, you would have to wear it around 30 times to cancel that environmental impact out. I recommend shopping secondhand, but still being conscious about how you consume, not going into the thrift store and buying up a whole bunch of stuff, buying your necessities, asking yourself, do I need these items? Are they gonna make me happy? Am I gonna wear them multiple times? Buying from sustainable and responsible brands, which I know isn't accessible for everybody because they can be costly, but these tend to put ethical labor at the forefront. They tend to be more of quality. And so if you can invest in a few pieces, you'll be able to have them for a few years. Research the brands that you buy from. Just type in the brand name, and after that put like environmental impact, labor conditions, diversity, just to kind of educate yourself and see what your brands stand for, who they're advocating for. And if you need to dispose of your clothes, I recommend finding a home for them first. See if a family member might want them or a friend, and then try and resell them on like a resale platform like Depop or Facebook Marketplace. And if you can, your last resort should be to donate them, because it's not always guaranteed that if you donate them, they're going to be used or sold. They might actually end up in the landfill. So my last slide is just some of my favorite sustainable fashion resources. I made a Google Doc that's a bit longer and it has a bunch of different resources since this topic is so varied. If you have an interest, like I just recommend like kind of tuning into that interest and doing some more research into it. But I realized that this issue is not an issue that we can fix overnight, and this process is not going to be perfect. But as consumers and advocates, we have the ability to shift the attitudes towards sustainable fashion and can make a really big difference. How we choose to spend our money has direct impact on what brands decide to produce and how they listen to us. They do listen to us. So if we make enough of an uproar, I believe that we will start to see some big changes happen. Well, I will share that Google Doc link in the chat. I really appreciate you guys letting me speak. I get a little nervous, so I'm sorry if I started speaking really fast, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
We definitely appreciate having you speak on this as well. This is definitely a super interesting and important topic to discuss, especially considering the consumerism that has been happening around America and increasing throughout the decades. So we appreciate you talking about this.
Thank you.
I realized that I never introduced myself. So my name is Camille Bedford, and I am an intern with the Office of Campus Sustainability. I dual major at Wayne State in global studies and urban planning. I focus a lot on the sustainable aspects of the city and trying to emphasize those. So I really focus on having natural areas, so parks accessible to urban areas, promoting recycling and composting. So I'm really passionate about trying to spread the ideas of sustainability around the community, as well as emphasizing the importance for green and environmental building infrastructure. So I would like to now introduce our next speaker, Saeed Khan, who is the director of Wayne State's Global Studies Department and a lecturer in the Near East and Asian Studies. He is a seasoned speaker, and he has contributed to several media agencies such as C-SPAN, Voice of America, and National Press Club. We are very excited to have him as our guest in our discussion about sustainability across the world. So without further ado, take it away, Mr. Khan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bedford, and thank you all for being here and for the wonderful work that Green Street is doing. So looking at the perception of sustainability development around the world, we are in a strange place as a country when it comes to the United States of America. And I'd like to go ahead and get the statistics out of the way first before we get to the anecdotes. The Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy has its Environmental Performance Index. And this year, the United States placed 24th out of 180 countries overall. At the top were in this order, Denmark, Luxembourg, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, France, and Austria. When it comes to the countries of the global West, however, America places second to last. The only country out of the 22 within the global West that falls behind us is Portugal. So when you take a look at this, if it is analogous to, say, the G20 or those countries which see themselves as being highly developed, it is a big challenge then to see where America's position is on that. And I'd like to take the point that, that Rahul made, which I think is extremely important. It really is about culture. If we're looking at sustainability development, we have, of course, this intersection of science, economics, policy, politics, and yes, culture. And in many ways, in order to understand why it seems as though there are such disparities, or perhaps for some such surprises, that some countries which might be expected to be far ahead and advanced in their, for lack of better words, wokeness on the issue of sustainability development tend to be almost inverted. In the same index, the bottom 5 countries are Liberia, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, and Cote d'Ivoire. I'm not sure, I haven't been able to assess why Liberia comes in last, but the other 4 countries do have something in common and what some might even consider to be an excuse. They're all conflict zones, so they might be excused if they are somewhat distracted by the various issues that are occurring there. So then how should we take a look around the world when it comes to being able to gauge the effectiveness of a country when it comes to its commitment to sustainability development? Well, one of the things that we have to then examine is not to necessarily look at this about whether rich countries are presumably better at it or so-called poor countries are somehow the other not carrying their proverbial weight. To the point that Maddie was making regarding fast fashion, perhaps a better inquiry is supply and demand, and then also looking at the amount of adverse impact. For example, clearly when it comes to some of the names that were mentioned, like Zara and Mango and the Gap, there's clearly a demand when it comes to those who are located in so-called developed countries. But what then is the impact in countries where the supply is provided for the demand? And what is going to then be the kind of ultimatums? What are going to be the kinds of demands made of these countries to become compliant, when we in many ways are not only part of the same hypocrisy, but we are forcing these countries because of cheap labor and because of raw materials to produce what we tend to crave. So it's important to understand that particularly in a global matrix, we really are all involved in this. Now, some of the most populous countries tend to be fairly way down on this list. In fact, India comes in at 168, China comes in at 120, and these are two countries which combined constitute well over 1/4 of the planet's population. So we need to understand, again, how we are all interconnected in this. But I would like to go ahead and provide some examples of, on an anecdotal basis, in my remaining 5 minutes, of how countries seem to be changing their culture in order to make sustainability development an issue of priority, in some cases an issue of primacy. And I've been fortunate enough to have traveled to all these countries within the last year and a half. Of course, nowhere in the last 7 months, but hopefully that will change soon. And it's interesting to see the ability of these countries to adapt. Iceland, as many of you know, is almost completely carbon neutral. It benefits from the fact that it has a relatively low population of 300,000, but it also has geothermal energy. So its reliance on so-called fossil fuels is very, very low. The Netherlands, a country that many of us here in the Detroit area, when it comes to international travel, particularly over the Atlantic, might encounter because of Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport being a hub for Delta. They have a very interesting way of dealing with sustainability there. 2 examples. One is all of the taxis that Uber uses from the airport to the city center are Teslas, so they are electric. And then also, if you happen to be transiting through the airport, you'll notice that they have charging stations for your respective devices, but they're ones that invite you to get on a bicycle. And as you are biking, it charges up your device. So you are actually conserving the environment, but at the same time, you're also getting a little bit of exercise as well. So it's really kind of self-contained. A couple of other countries recently that I saw and experienced their commitment to sustainability development. Saudi Arabia, which of course, on the one hand, can certainly be, and rightly so, excoriated for its carbon footprint by being a producer of oil, does have a commitment to go ahead and leverage the immense amount of solar energy that it can produce by having large solar farms, and also looking at coffee as a growth industry by making it all sustainable when it comes to recycled products, when it comes to composting, when it comes to using solar energy and solar cells to determine the soil health as well. A remarkable project that's happening on a small scale, but one that shows that there's a lot of commitment. South Africa, of course, only 2 years ago, particularly in the Western Cape, had a major problem when it came to drought, and Cape Town literally ran out of water. And we found that an entire city and an entire province of the Western Cape came together in a collective sense of need and urgency to all then climb on board when it came to rationing water. And we find that Cape Town was able to then come out from its immediate crisis. And yet at the same time, it has a paradigm shift when it comes to its culture to understand that fresh water supply is something that is important for everybody, irrespective of socioeconomic class. And we find that whether it is a wine producing farm or it happens to be somebody who is running an Airbnb, everyone is committed to do their part when it comes to having that. So this is what we're talking about when it comes to culture, and the perceptivity and the perception of people on the global level to these is something that certainly the United States can learn a lot about. Perhaps COVID is not the best case study when it comes to people uniting around a single consensus on the topic. But it's certainly something that hopefully maybe after the election, when our news stations cover something other than the domestic politics, we can then be educated about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. This is especially an important issue on understanding where other countries are coming from in their fight to become an environmentally friendly nation. So we appreciate your background on it. All right, we are going to move on to our next speaker. Grace is going to introduce our next speaker, Shirley Papuga.
So Dr. Shirley Papuga is an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Science and Geology. Dr. Papuga graduated with a bachelor's degree in math from Kalamazoo College. Kalamazoo College requires all of the students to do a senior individualized project. And this is where Dr. Papuga made her pivot into environmental science. Her senior year, she went to New Mexico to use mathematics to help address environmental problems at Los Alamos National Lab. She continued on the trajectory, earning her PhD in geological sciences, focusing on hydrology from the University of Colorado Boulder. She was on the faculty in the School of Natural Sciences and the Environment at the University of Arizona for 10 years before returning to her roots in Michigan, where she joined Wayne State's faculty in 2017. Her research focuses on the role of plants in hydrologic processes and how features of the land surface interact with the atmosphere. Recently, she has focused on complex urban environmental problems that require interdisciplinary collaborative efforts to effectively address them. She also worked to create our WSU weather station, which captures real-time images of the city skyline using a camera that monitors vegetation change in Detroit's urban forest. And this provides a metric for carbon accounting consistent with WSU's sustainability strategic plan. So with no further ado, Dr. Shirley Papuga.
All right, thank you, Grace, for the introduction. And also, I wanted to make sure that I noted about the undergraduate research, because undergraduate integration into that kind of stuff on doing research on campus is super important to me. And so it was an experience for me, and I want to make sure that I give that back to you guys. So I do want to try sharing my screen. Like Maddie, I get very nervous, especially now with all this technology. So hopefully this goes smoothly. And I'll start from the beginning here. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my slides. Okay.
Yep, we can see them.
All right, so I didn't mention that I was in 2010, I was a fellow for the Santa Fe Institute's Global Sustainability School. And it was a place where I really learned about how complex and interdisciplinary the topic of sustainability is. And so sustainability, I just want to put the definition out here. We've been talking a lot about it. It's based on simple principle. Everything that we need for our survival and well-being depends either directly or indirectly on our natural environment. So to pursue sustainability is to create and maintain the conditions under which humans and nature can exist in productive harmony to support present and future generations. So that's EPA's definition. So I said, I think Grace told you that I was at University of Arizona for 10 years before coming back to Michigan, and it sort of coming back to Wayne State reminded me that here we are in this Rust Belt region, Detroit, part of that automotive movement. That's a picture from the 1950s, the General Motors headquarters. But in the 60s and 70s, the Rust Belt began to suffer due to these increasingly high costs of manufacturing, the loss of jobs overseas, fear of unions, and the attraction of the Sun Belt. So that by the 1980s, we had these high unemployment, mass migration out of the cities, and as we can recognize, the vast amounts of abandoned properties and vacant lots. So for me, coming back, this post-industrial urban shrinkage sort of brought not only major socioeconomic issues, but also some exceedingly complex environmental conditions. So here's just a picture. I think this is from the New York Times, where this is, we're used to, if you're biking around Detroit or driving around Detroit, you can see a lot of places like this. This was in 2014, that Detroit, there's a lot of these tearing these buildings down. What was shocking to me moving back here was something like this image, where you can see these vacant lots as a percentage of sort of like what Detroit looks like. I mean, this red area you would not see in many of our growing cities like Phoenix or Denver. So for me, the presence of these vacant lands in these shrinking post-industrial cities offer great potential to provide ecosystem services. Okay, so what do I mean by ecosystem services? So ecosystem goods and services produce the many life-sustaining benefits we receive from nature: clean air and water, fertile soil for crop production, pollination, and flood control. These ecosystem services are important to environmental and human health and well-being, yet they are limited and often taken for granted. So that is the EPA's definition, and that's sort of a way to kind of get people thinking about the value of our environment. So for me, I have some projects in my research group that are related to ecosystem services. I've worked with this group, the Office of Campus Sustainability and the Green Warriors, on some other sustainability projects like the bike map and other things, but I'm focusing here on ecosystem services. So stormwater management is an ecosystem service, and I've been doing some green stormwater infrastructure with that. Carbon emissions mitigation, thinking about the urban tree canopy, and then contaminant phytoscreening or phytoremediation, and that's just related to urban plants in general. I'm not going to talk about the green stormwater management because I think Camille asked me to focus on pollutants, and so I wanted to sort of emphasize these two projects quickly. Grace also mentioned that we have the weather station up on top of the physics rooftop here on campus. And this is a picture of kind of what it looks like when you get up there. And what I want to focus on here is not the weather station itself. It's a fancy weather station in the sense that we measure some other things. We have mentioned that we can look out. I'm going to actually try to see if this loads up for you. You can see live from the rooftop what's going on in Detroit. And so you can see that's real-time Detroit right now from the rooftop. And so that camera on the rooftop not only does videos, but it also provides an hourly image of the greenness or the canopy, from the rooftop. So we can see different trees in the landscape. So here's the tower and sort of where it sits in this sort of vacant landscape here. And these dots here also represent industrial areas, sort of focus areas, okay? I'm going through this pretty quickly just because I'm just trying to give you an idea of what we do, not so you get all the details. This is the kind of data that our station collects. So you can see up here, it's real tiny, but just again, we get a lot of things, precipitation and air temperature, but we also are getting CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. This is our greenness data from the canopy that we get that's related to those images I told you. And then the station also does some carbon measurements for like a net exchange of carbon between the land surface and the atmosphere. So that's the kind of data we get. And so we're able to do some cool things. One of the things we've been looking at are pre-pandemic shelter in place order and post order carbon dynamics in the Detroit sort of airshed. And so we're kind of putting this information together right now. So that's one kind of thing that we've been able to do, thinking about carbon emissions. Then another thing that we've been doing is this contaminant phytoscreening, phytoremediation. What does that mean? So this is just an example of a place where you know there's below ground contamination, okay? This is the 1,4-dioxane plume in Ann Arbor. We know there's contamination below ground, but you basically have to drill a hole in many, many places to know where that contamination is and where it's going. But we rely on groundwater models to kind of help us think through where that contamination is and where it is headed. So Grace also mentioned that I look at the interactions between plants and hydrologic processes. And so here I'm showing you that plants actually connect into the ground through their root system, right? And so they're taking up water from the soil and bringing it up and into their biomass or their plant tissue, right? And so we were thinking if we go out and sample these trees, they may actually have contamination in them from a plume such as that at the 1,4-dioxane. And we might actually be able to use that above ground information to sort of look at, you know, these contamination problems in the health of our water systems, okay? So we did look at this. We've said, we went to the 1,4-dioxane plume, we knew it was there, and we said, yep, there's 1,4-dioxane in the plants too. So you guys may recognize this. This is, of course, the green ooze site up off of 696. This is the inside of the building. And so what we've been doing now, they don't have as much information about the plume of this site. There's been no groundwater modeling or anything like that. So we've actually, and we're just in the midst of this, going out and looking at pollutants or trees around this area, the site, and seeing if we can find those contaminants in the trees around the green ooze site, okay? So this is a picture of overhead of that site, and you can see these are the EPA monitoring wells, not very far from there. We're expanding that range out into those neighborhoods to see what we might see. This is what it looks like for us to sample these plants. This is just a picture. It is a super fun site. And you can see like there's a tree right next to the building. We want to see what that looks like in comparison to ones that are further away from the site and see if those residents, they've been told their drinking water is not contaminated, but we're also concerned about the soil and the plants that they're living among, okay? And this sort of comes back to bringing us back to sort of that human component. I really wanted to point out that here's, so that was in, you know, Madison Heights. We are now coming back to Detroit, but I want to point out that this here is a map of preterm births, okay? So you can see that this Madison Heights site is just right up here. And you can see, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there that it could, I don't know, maybe it's related, maybe not, but there's a really high preterm birth there. And then there's some other sites within Detroit. I don't know if you guys saw in the news that this 5900 Commonwealth, that address is associated with green ooze site number 2. Okay, in the news where this, a resident near here actually exposed that the inside of this building sort of looks exactly like the inside of that building. And what I want to point out is that these preterm birth is actually higher than I would hope in sort of this area too. And so wondering if there might be a relationship between that. So that's sort of the kind of pollutant type work that we've been looking at in the Detroit area and linking it to sustainability issues. Thank you for letting me tell you at least about those. I have some more, if you're interested in that campus weather station, you can follow it at Weather at Wayne on Twitter. And then also, it is the data from that weather station you can find on Weather Underground. All of that information is on our lab website, the envisid.com, which stands for Environmental Science in Detroit. So, thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. I definitely, as a urban planning student, recognize the importance of the environment in urban areas. Seeing that population in cities are now growing. So it's important to emphasize the importance of sustainability, not only across the nation, but as well as the infrastructure of our cities. I would now like to introduce our last speaker, Dr. Ahmad Ezzeddine. He's the Associate Vice President for the Educational Outreach and International Programs at Wayne State. He also serves as Wayne's Senior International Officer and works to partner with institutions across the globe where he leads new educational and research opportunities for students and faculty. Today, he will be discussing the United Nations Sustainability Goals and how they play a part in the world's efforts to promote sustainable measures. Please welcome Dr. Ezzeddine.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me with you and for putting a great webinar so far. I'm always fascinated and always learn something new about the great things we're doing here on campus that I had no idea we were doing. I mean, I knew we are great, but you know, like some of these examples and some of the work that Shirley just talked about and Rahul's project and you know and Saeed and of course the students, you guys are stars. So I texted the dean and you know said like the students are great. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. And for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that's really I'm very passionate about. I got introduced to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal, back in 2016. I was at a conference and Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, and there was one person talking about, you know, had a presentation about the role of universities in supporting the SDGs. And I wasn't familiar with them, and I don't know how many of you have heard about the SDGs. Just show of hands. Okay, but a lot. I mean, but you'll be surprised at how many people don't know, haven't heard, and you know they wouldn't. You know, we would say they wouldn't. But the SDGs really basically are simply a. You could think of them as the master plan. We just went through a master plan for the university. This is a master plan for the planet, strategic plan for the planet to make the world a better place for everyone and without destroying it for the generations that are coming after us. In 2015, there were 193, all the countries of the United Nations agreed on 17 goals to protect the planet, eradicate poverty and hunger, and provide basic needs, equal rights, and accessible opportunities for everyone. And I'll share my screen and show you what. Here we go. Can you see my screen? So those are the 17 goals. You would see they're divided. I mean, if you look at them, they're divided around 3 dimensions, basically. So there is like society and progress, you know, education, health, safety, food, and medicine. So focusing on those areas, economic development, opportunities, job, trade, business, and climate, the environment, air, water, land, plants, and animals. Interestingly enough, so if these 3, the society, economic development, and climate and environment are comparable to when the Detroit Future Cities Plan, for example, was focused on 3 areas: place, economy, and people. So there is that synergy. And, you know, so why is this important? What really attracted me to it? And I've been thinking a lot about it. And, you know, some of, you know, the dean and Daryl know how, I mean, I've talked to them about it for a while back. It's really they're connected to what we are doing here in Detroit. Why is this important to us? In my travel, I'm like Saeed, I've traveled quite a bit. I've been homebound for the last 7 months, getting very antsy. But I was once in Okayama, Japan, and the city of Okayama approached the University of Okayama to really help them implement and reach the goal, focus on these goals and try to see how they can achieve them by the year 2030. And so that was one of the opportunities that made me think about our role as an urban university committed to some of these issues. And if you think about all of these areas, we are dealing with them currently. There are some serious issues when it comes to poverty, when it comes to hunger, access to education. We know a lot of, since this summer, and actually before, but this summer came to the forefront, all the racial issues that we are dealing with, the inequities that we are dealing with, the health inequities that the pandemic has really brought front and center. So there are a lot of things that as SDGs tie to what we are doing here at the university, or can be doing at the university, in our role as an urban university that with a mission of service and community engagement. So from that perspective, one of the activities, one of the goals for me and my role as Associate Vice President for International Programs and focusing on giving opportunities for our students to not only gain a global experience, but also more importantly, link the global to the local. And we're looking at the SDGs now as a framework to help us shape those opportunities and tie it to some of the activities and some of the courses and the learning experiences that you heard about now, whether it is in fashion, whether it is in communication or global studies. So those are the things that we are trying to focus on, creating these opportunities for our students and our faculty to engage and bring in the global lessons to the local to our local community, but also share some of the successes that we have with our global partners. With that, I'm going to be our focus. I'm working with the Dean and Daryl on an exciting opportunity that you will be hearing about in the coming months that is related to this with Windsor. And there are more opportunities that will be created. And we're hoping that this would be a framework that can tie a lot of the work that we talked about today and just give us that framework and help us connect to national and international initiatives that are along the same path. With that, I will stop, and it's 5:02 actually, so I'm 2 minutes over my time.
Thank you, Dr. Ezzeddine, and I look forward to hearing what this new program will be in the future with Windsor. It sounds very exciting. I would now like to thank everyone for presenting on these extremely important aspects of keeping our world safe for future generations. I would now like to open up the discussion for questions from participants or to any dialogue between the speakers. If you would like to unmute yourself or put your question in the chat, we can go from there. I have some questions myself, but I would like to see if anyone would prefer to go first. I'm gonna pin all of our speakers real quick. Are they showing up? Is everyone pinned? Okay.
Yep, I can see everybody.
If anybody has questions, feel free to ask them, and we will start from there.
If nobody in the audience has any questions, I just have a quick comment and then a quick question. I just want to echo what Grace said about Maddie Holloman. because she is absolutely a humble, silent leader. And I think the group is really excited to see her, develop into the young designer that she is. And we'll all be wearing FY32 Maddie Holloman in the future because it's going to be the thing to buy. So I just wanted to say that note. And then I actually have kind of a question for Dr. Mitra and Dr. Ezzeddine. It was really great to see the outline for what those UN Sustainable Development Goals are, because I know we've been chatting about it in the office, and those are, tying it back to the community is really great, because I think coming from somebody who lived in the Metro Detroit area and never really traveled down to the city, I didn't really have a lot of knowledge about the city of Detroit. I never, Wayne State was my only affiliation with that. And I think this could be a question for not just those two speakers, but the entire group, is how do we give undergrads more of an opportunity to become involved with the community? Because I think a lot of students come in with a lack of understanding about, just Detroit as an area and its history. And that's insensitive. I know there are a ton of opportunities, and everyone here, our jobs are to do that. So just it's kind of a broad question, but that's a point that I kind of started to think about as I got more involved in the community.
Sure. I'll go first. Ahmad, then you can add. I'm an immigrant, and I'm originally from India, and my parents lived there, and I'm sort of one of those global families of sort. My parents are in India, my brother and his partner are in Australia, and I'm over here with my family. And so I'm someone who has found meaningful connections in the places that I'm in. And I'm lucky to have found one of those really meaningful connections here in Detroit with a lot, not just, my friends and my amazing colleagues and my students, but also I think the community partners that I work with over here. That's not always been easy, right? And as someone who has worked with students, both undergraduate and graduate, with community partners, that's something that, you realize also that that's a tricky situation that you need to be in, especially when you're working with underserved communities. Because even sometimes the most well-meaning people might end up not really knowing enough about the history and about the context, and essentially, unfortunately, end up erasing, whether they meant it or not, the lived experiences and the context of a lot of the people in a space or a context. So one of the things that I try to do with my classes or my research teams when we're doing service learning or research projects with community partners is we talk about those issues first internally. I share resources like the resource, whether the research articles or news articles or examples of the research that's already been ongoing in a particular project, to make sure that everyone's a little clear about what are we doing over here, why are we doing this, what are some of the issues that have to be addressed on the ground. And if the students are supposed to be working with community partners on a particular project, I try to make sure that I have a conversation with the students first, and I encourage them to find information out about that. We have that broader conversation before introducing them to the client, or if you're doing a service learning project, for instance. So so far that seems to have worked out quite fine. I haven't heard bad things for any of my classes, from any of my community partners. We've had undergraduate students working with Michigan Sierra Club and the Healing Our Waters Coalition on creating all sorts of wonderful op-ed pieces for news publications. They've created videos, they've created brochures and pamphlets. And I've had community partners come back and tell us that, they've been so excited about the work, and they really want to come back and work with us again, and work with the students again, because it was really, really helpful. So I think it's a process of getting to know, understanding, and the history, and it's not easy, but it's important.
I agree. I think we are fortunate. We have a lot of connections to the community at the university. We have many of our faculty, like Rahul, have their own connection. I know Saeed, for the same, they have projects, they engage their students, they're connected to the nonprofits, the government or public institutions. So there is a lot that is there. Is it coordinated? We could use some improvement in that aspect. It's because at a large university, unfortunately, there is, you have a very large, very decentralized university. It is hard to really to track and keep our arms around all these efforts all the time. There are some efforts underway, though, to try to coordinate some of these activities. So one thing that we are doing out of my office, we're working on a registry that tells us about, basically tracks all of our community engagement. So we know who is working with whom and what type of engagement, whether it is research, whether it's service learning, whether it's just basic sponsorships, volunteer activities. We're coordinating with the DOSO on that. And that will give us at least the ability to create dashboards that can help both units within the campus and students to connect. So if you want to work with the DPS, then you can go to DPS and see which departments and which units are working with DPS, and then you can maybe plug in that way. So that's one initiative that's underway. We are done with the design. We are populating it now as on a pilot to make sure we work out some of we test it basically, and we're gonna hopefully roll it out by the end of the semester. Campus-wide. So that's one. On the Global Office of International Programs initiative, one of our initiatives in the Office of International Programs is also one of my pet project is global learning for all. I would like every Wayne State student to have a global experience. But the global experience doesn't have to be only study abroad. We know only a few students have the opportunity for a variety of reasons to go study abroad. We will help them with that. But there are opportunities to get that global experience locally. Can we do a project in Hamtramck with the Bangladeshi community, for example, or in Southwest Detroit with the Hispanic community, and Dearborn with the Arab American community, so that we have those ingredients right 10, 15 minutes away from our campus. And we can create these rich experiences to give the students the intercultural competencies and essentially the language competencies and all of those experiences that they can get. And hopefully that gives them that exposure, and maybe down the road, they would like to go then and experience an immersion experience in a country by traveling. We can help them with that. So that's another way we are trying to create opportunities for students and for our faculty to engage. And you will see the initiative that I mentioned earlier that will also create more opportunities for our faculty to engage. And by them engaging, then they will hopefully bring this to the classroom and create opportunities for students to be involved in some of those activities.
Could I just add to that, Ahmad? I know you and I have spoken about this, and I've also spoken to Dean Hartwell. One of the ways that we could harness all of the resources that we have, tap into the broader Metro Detroit community, maybe even tap into something more global, is proposing the idea of global studies becoming an incubator, working with OIP, and have it be a facilitator for some of these big projects. That will, I think, be a wonderful way for Wayne State to be at the vanguard of demonstrating a way for universities to go back to their happy place, their real raison d'etre of being idea solvers or idea generators and also issue solvers. And I think that particularly now with COVID-19, the kinds of opportunities that we can start building with virtual exchange programs, tapping into people overseas as well as like-minded and certainly interested institutions around the country. We're on the threshold of something really exciting that we can leverage as a result of the opportunity, not necessarily just the challenge that COVID-19 has provided for us. So hopefully we can take this, again, the ideas that we've already started to germinate and then put all the pieces together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are working actually heavily on creating these virtual exchanges now. I don't know if there was a story today at Wayne about a new initiative we have with the United Arab Emirates. We have also a similar initiative with German universities and yesterday was a pilot. We had a class in our business school connecting with their counterparts in Germany. So the project is gonna be marketing students here and business students there working on a joint research project. These things can be done virtually, and yes, COVID has hastened and helped us kind of make this a reality faster and sooner than we would have otherwise.
So this is Shirley. I'd like to comment on this one too. So taking us away from sort of that global scale, which is, I feel like I totally agree that these global connections are really important. But I wanted to highlight one other, I think, opportunity that I think is often overlooked is, for me, it wasn't until I got out of school that I realized how important it is for civic engagement. And so I always encourage people to sort of see how all of these interconnecting pieces come together. So in my classes, I'm always encouraging students to go to public meetings. Mayor and council go to those meetings and see, because all of these players we're talking about are all at these meetings, the environmental consultants, the people in the public office, you know, the public water, you know, those people are all at these meetings and they all have different perspectives and stakeholders in sort of the issues, and they're often related around sustainability. So something that you think is like green stormwater infrastructure, you're going to see people from transportation and like all over the place, and the neighborhoods, all from, and I think it's a really important place to learn and also make connections to your community. So I just want to put that out there. I think that's an important thing.
Thank you. And I do want to applaud you all for all this information and all of your developments, because Wayne State is uniquely positioned to lead the way in that arena, as you know, as we've talked about. And I've only had, I don't think my experience at university would be the same anywhere else. So the amount of opportunities that I've been exposed to have been immense. And for any of the students that are attending in the audience today, definitely reach out to me, Camille, Grace, Daryl, and get involved with the office, because I got my first internship opportunity and many more through becoming involved. So that's all.
Hey, everybody. Holy cow, are there so many cool things happening at Wayne State. I knew little to nothing about the sustainability efforts, but this is just incredible. It's so much more than I would have guessed. I am really curious if anybody can enlighten me about any supply chain transparency or traceability efforts or initiatives that are happening at Wayne State. So that's about as cross-disciplinary as it gets. So I'd be really excited to learn about if that's happening.
There is a faculty member in the business school who is working, she is in the marketing department, supply chain, and they are her area of research is, I'll pull her name and put it, her area of research is actually in in this sustainability. She's focusing on sustainability. So she could, at least that's someone I know of. There may be others, I'm sure.
Andrea Tangari. I just added her name in the Zoom chat. Yeah, Andrea does some amazing work. She was actually at the last year's Green Streets event, so she's awesome.
Does anyone have any other questions you'd like to ask?
I just want to add to, just to piggyback off Rahul, that, you know, I've only been here since 2017, and I have continued to just like it. You asked this question, Nick, about is somebody doing this? I'm sure there are people doing, there's so many people doing things that are sustainability related that we just have, you know, in nutrition or in public health, you know, and it's just really, it's not obvious necessarily because it's so interdisciplinary, that I think one of our challenges on campus is sort of coming together, I think, as everyone on this panel has sort of said, and finding each other and really moving forward together, to make that impact that I think we can have.
And I think there is an opportunity for us on the curriculum side to really create those natural linkages when it comes to interdisciplinary work. So hint, faculty, get working.
As long as we've got a couple of minutes to kill, I do have another question, and it might be a deeper, longer topic than is appropriate here, but yeah, it turns out saving the planet is kind of an iterative process, and we're not great at it yet. So the MDGs really fell flat on their face, but there's a lot of optimism around the SDGs. As educators and as a higher learning institution, what's the different role that your organization is playing in the SDGs versus the Millennium Development Goals?
I don't think we were, frankly, deliberately pursuing the Millennium Development Goals before. On the SDGs, at least now we are aware we're doing a lot of things that impact the SDGs or that tie to the SDGs, you know, without knowing them. I mean, we weren't doing them. And I think the big thing for us, at least my personal opinion, is we have to work and we can influence our local community, and we can have an impact around us first before we start worrying about and the broader. I mean, I think where we can really execute on the SDGs is what we can. It's basically based on what we can do around us. We are dealing with some, and it's things that we are already doing. You know, the fact that we have a pantry to support our students. I mean, that's an effort that's tying to eliminating hunger. You know, just something as basic as that, you know, and I think we need to start making the connections and communicating those to our Wayne State community and around us, and that will bring awareness of the SDGs, and then everybody can hopefully get on board and focus on the things that we are not fully working on. But I think I can give you, just the things we talked about today are things that tie directly to multiple goals. The work that Shirley's doing, you know, it ties to the water and water quality and sanitation. You know, there are many examples that we can point to that address and show how we are at least contributing to reaching the goals, at least in our community, in our direct influence.
Ahmad, if I could go ahead and just add to that. Well, let me see, where am I? Okay. One of the things that I really recommend everyone reading is the United Nations Global Sustainable Development Report of 2020, or at the very least, if you'd like, read the executive summary, which is about 25 pages long. I find it to be a kind of textual crisper because what it does is it ties in all of these different areas along with its recommendations, and there's definitely something that everyone can find in reading that. that appeals to them, they can plug in, and also they can start thinking about with whom they can make those very important connections. So actually, I think I found the report here, and I'm gonna post it in the chat group. So feel free to go ahead and download that. But it's again, even the executive summary, wonderful starting point to go ahead and not only be inspired, but see the interconnectivity of so many of these issues.
Maddie, I have a quick question for you. I didn't really know a whole lot about fast fashion before this, although now I'm finding out that I've regretfully and unbeknownst to me participated in it. I would like to know if the consumerist aspect of America that we tend to consume, is that a uniquely American thing? I know that fast fashion has effects across the planet, but are other countries participating in the consumerist problem of it?
I would say that from a lot of like the studying that I've done and like just, you know, seeing stuff on social media, I think that it's a global issue in which how much we consume, but the way in which Americans consume is like over the top. I think that like, I know like a lot of like Norwegian countries as well as European countries really put an emphasis on sustainability. And so I see a lot more from those a lot of European countries I see like trying to put sustainability at the forefront, even though, you know what I mean? But like, yes, I would say that America has a very over the top view and practice on sustainability, just to put in like simple terms from what I've seen, but yeah.
So I just want to add a little bit to that. So we've been, one of the projects I've been working with Dr. Yang-Li Zhang in the Civil and Environmental Engineering department is looking at microplastics pollution and how microplastics get into our water systems. And the largest source of that is fibers and clothes. And so one of the interventions, community-based interventions that we've been working with our community partners is thinking about everyday interventions that you can utilize that can hopefully mitigate the risk of microplastics pollutions. And one of them is, for instance, using laundry bags in your when you do your laundry. Not a lot of people know what laundry bags are. To be honest, I had no idea what they were either before I started work on this project with these folks. And the reason why we are so personally, my personal thinking is that none of these options can be pursued in isolation with each other. You cannot really pursue a local strategy of saying, hey, use laundry bags, and that will automatically, magically, reduce the problem if everyone is constantly buying more and more microfleece and rayon and other options of clothing. And so you do need to push at the policy level as well. And so you need a combination of resources in social movements and organizational communication. We basically call it collective action. You need multiple strategies, both activist strategies and policy level strategies and legislative strategies to address these what we call wicked problems, right? Where they're concerted, they're multi-level, there's multiple stakeholders that are involved. And so what we're doing with this project is trying to find out what can help ease the situation one way, the convenience way. At the same time, we're also trying to ascertain community perceptions about what kind of policy level changes would they support. would they be okay with banning plastic, single-use plastics, for instance, in their communities, in their local communities, if the state or the country does not have something like that? When would they be okay with that kind of a change? So really thinking about these changes at multiple levels is really important. I also want to be a little careful when we're talking about policy level changes because it's very easy, potentially, if we don't think about all of these things very holistically, it's very easy to, I think, unduly penalize, people at the lower income spectrum for their consumption habits and patterns by, because to be honest, if you are a low income family, chances are you are more likely to have synthetic and plastic plastic-based products compared to if you were on a higher income spectrum. And so we also don't necessarily want to, again, basically guilt poor folks, saying, hey, it's your fault, when arguably it is probably, again, a structural problem of the fact that this is just totally fine at the policy level, and we should be penalizing perhaps some of the plastics and oil and gas companies that are producing these plastics to begin with, and actively lobbying to have these plastics utilized, anything and everything from straws to fabrics and clothing. So we do want to be a little careful, I think, with the rhetoric that we adopt when we talk about some of these environmental pollutants and issues, because words matter. As a communications scholar, I know that really well. Words matter.
Thank you for that, and thank you to all of our speakers for joining us. It is 5:30, so we will be wrapping up for this afternoon. Again, we really appreciate everyone that has made this possible. And for everyone who came out and was able to share this with us. I highly encourage all of you to join us for our last Green Street event happening next Friday, the 23rd from 4 to 5 about the Dark Water spill and PFAS in Michigan. You can also keep in touch with our office through following our social media accounts. You can follow us at Warrior Sustainability on Instagram and Facebook, or email us for updates at sustainability@wayne.edu. We hope you all have a safe and great weekend, and thank you for joining.